Hello, welcome to the channel. My name is Sai Jornavali. Today I will be doing an analysis on public charter schools and comparing them with public schools. I read Thomas Sowell's book, Charter Schools and Their Enemies, and I came away with a different perspective on charter schools and our public education system as a whole. I'll be honest, I didn't know what charter schools were before I picked up the book, so let's start with that. According to Google, a charter school is a school that receives government funding but operates independently of the established state school system in which it is located. The first charter schools were introduced in the 1990s and were supposed to be an experiment. The thought process was, we'll give independence to a private group and see if they can find a better curriculum to educate the kids. Seems like a good idea, right? You let the private market figure out how to do something efficiently, and then you adopt the good stuff that works. In charter schools' short lifespan, they've been fairly successful. They increased in numbers by 500%, and there are over 1 million kids nationwide on a wait list to go to a charter school. Okay, next, I want to compare charter schools to public schools from a very high level. They're both funded by taxpayer money, so it's free for all kids. Kids join public schools based on geography and what district they live in, while kids join charter schools through a lottery system. You have to send in an application and then you're chosen randomly. It's not by merit. The big difference between the two is that public schools are run by the State Board of Education, which means they're highly regulated by the state government, while charter schools are run by a private group that got government approval. It's independent from the state government and Board of Education. So you can think of charter schools being run as a private company, but they don't turn a profit because they're officially a non-profit organization. All right, so before I move on to the meat of the video, I need to say this because I know people will bring this up in the comments. John Oliver, in his show Last Week Tonight, had a segment on charter schools where he roasted them and showed how bad they are. But he does bring up one important fact. According to a study done by Stanford University, on a national level, charter school students in general perform about the same as their peers in traditional public schools. My problem with his take is that he focuses on the bad, failing schools, but I'm only interested in the successful schools. I define successful as an organization that achieves great results and has a model that can be expanded. For example, a successful restaurant is a restaurant that can expand, where there's a demand for its food in other areas and regions. Okay, so now that's out of the way, I will now present to you my three-part argument on why I think charter schools are better than public schools. It's important to compare apples to apples here because it'd be unfair to compare two schools where there are differences in the students. For example, one school is filled with students from high-income families, while another school is primarily from low-income families. Thomas Sowell, in his book, only compared statistics from schools that met the following three criteria. Both schools had a similar ethnic background of students. Students in both schools are taught in the same building. And number three, charter school and public school have one or more classes at the same grade in the same building. Schools meeting all three criteria is not common, but I believe they're the right prerequisites in order to make a fair comparison. In the school year 2017 to 2018 in New York City, there was over 23,000 students in both charter schools and public schools that meet this criteria. All the students in the schools were classified as economically disadvantaged by the New York State Department of Education, and the student body demographics consisted of at least 90% Black or Hispanic. These charter schools share the buildings with public schools, so you can be certain this is a fair comparison where the only difference is the school curriculum. In order to save time, I'm going to give you an overview of the results, but I will post the results and links to sources in the description, and I encourage you to take a look at the data for yourself. As you can see for yourself, the charter schools blow the public schools out of the water. It is not even fair. Here's a quick recap. Out of all charter schools, 65% of classes had majority score level 3 or 4. Compared to public schools, only 14% of classes scored level 3 or 4. As reported by the Wall Street Journal, majority of students in New York City public schools are not proficient. Meanwhile, in charter schools, 57% of Black and 54% of Hispanics are proficient. And compare that to 52% of white students statewide. That last stat is wild because you would think that suburban students with more money would have the advantage. And that makes you think whether money actually plays a role when you're trying to educate kids. All right, so after looking at the results, you can see when the environments are equal, I think it's safe to say that charter schools do a better job educating our children. Let's move on to part 2. This question is actually a lot easier to answer than you would think. It all comes down to the teachers and their incentives. Charter school teachers get rewarded and penalized based on good or bad student test results. That seems like a very fair and obvious way to track job performance, wouldn't you say? Charter school teachers are also not part of teachers' unions, so they can get fired very easily. And because of this incentive, I think you can see why they do a better job at educating their kids, because their job is quite literally on the line. Public school teachers, on the other hand, they're totally different. Public schools are forced to be accountable to countless regulations and rules by teacher union contracts. This makes teachers accountable to follow rules, not to the test results. You see, it's very difficult to fire public school teachers because of union contracts. The Wall Street Journal reported that it takes on average 830 days and costs $313,000 to fire a bad teacher. And get this, teachers will go on trial during this multi-year firing process and they still get paid their salary for doing absolutely nothing all day. Right now, the New York Education Department has over 600 teachers not working, but still getting paid a salary. This costs the city $30 million a year. Our taxpayer dollars should be going to educating the children, not to these unions and bad teachers. If it's so difficult to fire a teacher, that's going to ruin the quality of teachers in our public school system. I mean, what is their incentive anyway for students to get better test scores? Their jobs are safe either way. It's pathetic that adults in our public school system are willing to sacrifice our children's future and education so that they can keep their jobs safe. Let's move on to part 3. I'm sure you can guess this for yourself, but public schools do not like charter schools, and it all comes down to money. You see, it takes money to educate kids, and the government gives, on average, around $20,000 to a school per student. In New York City, there are over 50,000 students on charter school waitlists, so you do the math. Public schools would lose billions of dollars in funding if all waitlisted kids got into charter school. This is why public school officials and politicians limit the expansion of charter schools. Politicians advocate for teachers' unions because they contribute financially to re-election campaigns. When there's more charter schools, there's less demand for public schools. Less public schools means less public teachers, which means less money for teachers' unions, which means less money for political re-election campaigns. I will end this part with a quote from Albert Schenker, who was the head of the largest teachers union in New York City. When school children start paying union dues, that's when I'll start representing the interests of school children. It's a shame that the success of charter schools are not covered by the media, and it's worse that teachers unions and politicians are taking advantage of our children. My goal for this video was to make you aware and curious about this issue. All I ask is that you like, comment, and share this video so we can help raise awareness. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next week. Peace!